What's the harm in charm? Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 235th episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. If you missed last week's episode, actually, well, I guess it was last week, but it was just the last business day, last Friday. Tune in to listen to Mr. Craig Petronella. He's a client of mine. I've known him for years. He's been in the IT space, computer service, managed services, and he has grown his pricing, the fees he charges by 2x, by 10x, even 20x in some cases. He has mastered the art of being everywhere, of positioning himself as the expert. So he is the only choice in a very competitive, a very commoditized industry. But it is commoditized no more in his world because of the specific actions he has taken. And remember, he's coming at this as a geek, right? As a nerd, a computer geek. And yet he is dominating the marketing landscape in his niche. And the other thing he has done is chosen a niche. So you want to check out what my good friend, good buddy Craig Petronella is up to. Head on over to thesaleswhisperer.com/session234 to get the lowdown on that, as well as the notes and the links to the free tools he's offering in that. Today we have Mr. Jordan Harbinger. He is the founder of The Art of Charm. Won't steal too much of his thunder. Very interesting dude, killing it nowadays. Great story that you are in for a treat. I just got back from a 4-day weekend, although it wasn't a vacation. Spent a little time driving out to L.A., Woodland Hills area. My wife came with me and masterminded with some friends of mine on Friday. And that was fantastic. Then spent 2 days in a conference on speaking, on persuasion. It's the second time I've attended this conference, and also spent 8 days with the guy back in September. And what we need to understand about how we communicate, how we persuade, how we convince, how we stand out, how we create ourselves as the only logical choice is not easy. There are literally a lifetime of things you can learn, and I've been dedicating myself to the art of charm, if you will, right? The art of persuasion. My goal is not to overcome objections. My goal is to eliminate objections before they ever come up. And you can do that in webinars. You can do that when you speak. You can do that online with blog posts, with videos that you make, teaching a concept, helping yourself stand out, helping yourself become the only logical choice. And so, because I'm always a student, always learning, it was a great weekend. I'm glad to have my wife out there because she can see things from a different perspective. So who is holding you accountable, right? Who do you mastermind with? Who do you surround yourself with? Like Jim Rohn would say, you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. I've changed my friends over the years, at least those that I hang out with more, right? Your friend's a friend. But it doesn't mean you have to hang out with them all the time. So you need to understand as well that people, by and large, are not really excited by your success. And that's tough to handle at first until you understand human psychology, really how we're beat down in schools, how our educational system is so outdated. By 150 years outdated. How I think the political realm is stacked against us. Certainly your boss doesn't want you to get too good. Wants you to be good enough that he can make a profit off of you, but not so good that you'll leave and create competition for him. So when you understand that that's the world people are raised in, they can't really help feeling the way they feel. Because so few people are willing to form their conscience, right? They're so unwilling. They don't even know that it's an option to go out and improve themselves. I just wrote a blog post today And the numbers are staggering about the percentage of people that don't read, that literally cannot read. And then the percentage, I think it's 50% of people, of Americans, U.S. adults, can't read above like the 5th or 8th grade level. So, I think they say, most people after they graduate high school never read another book again. So we're pulled into this society of fast food, right? Instant gratification. You don't have to work for anything, no responsibility. And then we're surprised, right? When those same friends want to keep us down, hey, don't go to that seminar. Come to the bowling league, right? Come drink a beer and hang out and watch a movie. And it's like, no, dude, I'm going to go get better. So, who are you surrounding yourself with, right? Who are you afraid to leave behind? Ask yourself that question, and answer it honestly. And if there are people that, good people, right? But if they're not motivated, if they're not driven, if they're not people of excellence, if they're not going where you want to go, you may have to leave them behind. So you can get where you want to go, where you need to go. And you know what? You can always leave a trail, right? If they want to follow, by all means, help them. But, you got to put your oxygen mask on first, right? If you're traveling with someone that needs assistance. And chances are high that those around you need assistance. And to save them, you need to first save yourself. And you do that by surrounding yourself with better people. You're on the right track listening to this podcast. And it's not necessarily just this podcast, but the fact that you're listening to interviews and stories and advice from people that are succeeding, that are excelling in a particular area, instead of listening to music, instead of goofing off. Of course, you could be jamming out while you're working out. But, if you're like me, you're listening to podcasts. You're listening to, books on tape or books on MP3. It doesn't quite roll off your tongue like books on tape, does it? Books on MP3, but, audible books, to take advantage of the time that you have. Zig Ziglar talks about, automobile university. And the cool thing with podcasts, you can listen at double speed. I listen to all podcasts at double speed. And audio books, I listen at least double speed, usually triple speed. What I'll do a lot of times is listen at 2.5 speed the first time around, and then triple speed the second time. So I'm literally listening to the book twice in less time than other people listen to it just once. And you can keep along or, keep up with it. So try it. And that's why on these podcasts, there's a setting when I upload these to classify this as music or podcast. And when the podcast option is chosen, then the ability to speed it up becomes available to you. So check that out. See if you can't get more info out of these. And it's the same thing with speed reading. If you've ever taken a speed reading course, they have you skim the outline and skim every page, literally as fast as you can turn the pages. And then go back and drag your finger across and read it, twice as slow, but it's still super fast. You're still turning the pages almost as fast as you can. And then you do it a third time, a little bit slower. And what happens is over time, that repetition, words and phrases and ideas do start to pop out. And then you see the book in its entirety. Then the beginning makes sense because you kind of understand the middle and the end. And so even by flipping through that multiple times, it's still much faster than doing it once. So, try it. And I say, listen to these multiple times. Get the ideas out of them. Slow it down. Pause it. Take some notes. Then go look up the things that I mentioned. That's how you get better. Okay? That's why you're hearing me more and more drive and emphasize the Make Every Sale course. It's a lifetime access to surround yourself with people that are dedicated and committed to getting better in the profession of sales. But the reality is everything is sales. Your marketing, your copywriting. So I get into everything. There's no question I won't answer around landing pages, email sequences, copywriting, headlines, subject lines, how to do a podcast, how to write a book, because it's all sales. But yeah, the main focus is on one-on-one sales. But still, as an entrepreneur and a business owner, I'll help you answer those questions as well. So check out makeeverysale.com. We've got updated pricing, got payment plans, and it's lifetime access. I don't know how to make it any easier or more affordable for you. So check it out, makeeverysale.com. Now let's bring on our guest, Mr. Jordan. Jordan Harbinger, The Art of Charm. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you, man?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate a man of your stature, your caliber, your fame, your fortune, your wisdom, carving out a few minutes for little old me. Must be like a Southern California thing, huh? Just a little mutual respect, so you made some time for me?
You know it. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
So I have followed y'all for a while. You got a good thing going on. And would you mind, can we go back to the beginning? Because you started out, if I remember correctly, were you actually an attorney? Can we say that out loud?
I was an attorney, yes. I'm ready to face my past transgressions.
So how does an attorney, former attorney, recovering attorney, learn about charm?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it was the beginning when I was younger, actually. It goes back to when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I was bored. I was skipping school a lot, not recommended, and I just generally was not. I was so socially anxious, I couldn't handle it, and I didn't like people looking at me and stuff like that. So I skipped school and went home, and I got a computer, and I started getting in trouble, like cloning cellular phones and doing some social engineering and stuff like that. I learned how to wiretap, and I started wiretapping my neighbors, which I hope the statute of limitations is up on that. I started wiretapping my neighbors, and I was 14 years old, and this was about the first time. It was definitely the first time that I had ever had an experience where an adult was more three-dimensional than just somebody who yelled at you, fed you, or, otherwise gave you homework. Because when you're that age, that's all adults kind of do. And
right.
So this for me was an interesting experience because I heard this guy getting a divorce, and it was like he's talking to his soon-to-be ex-wife this way, and then he's talking to his sister that way, and he's talking to his buddies this way, and his brother that way, and then his mom, he's a totally different person. And I got the idea that people have all these complex emotions. It's not just me. I'm not the only real person in the world as a kid. And, as a kid, you don't understand your own emotions anyways. Or at least I didn't. So this was super interesting for me. And later on, when I became an attorney, I was hired by this guy named Dave. And Dave was a young partner. He was never in the office. He was a guy from Brooklyn who had a tan, right? So he's got an edge somewhere. And for me, it was just really interesting to see him work. And I put that in air quotes because the guy was golfing. He was doing jiu-jitsu. He went on charity cruises. He was a rainmaker. That was his job, getting business for the firm. So he made more money than the other partners naturally. And on top of that, he never had to come to the office and do all the boring stuff. And I even asked him, I was like, do you work from home? And he goes, no, I just delegate a lot because I'm doing this. And it basically showed me how his time was worth about $1,000 an hour to the firm because he'd bring in $1 million law deal. And that same hour that was worth more than the lawyer billing it at 3 a.m. on a Sunday night,
right.
That hour was spent on a golf course with an investment banker who he's friends with, who went to his wedding. And I thought, not only does that sound 1,000,000 times more appealing to my millennial mind, but on top of that, I'm not the smartest guy at this firm, and I'm not going to be able to outwork these people. When you're younger and you're in school, before you get to Wall Street, before you get to law school, you've got the ability to coast by on your smarts, which is what got me through high school, or outwork everybody, which is what got me through college, and then outwork everybody in law school and try and use my natural talents to find some sort of other niche that isn't just being better at the books, because that's where the elite go who are good at the books, and I wasn't one of those guys. So when I got to Wall Street, you're no longer able to leverage those inborn competitive advantages. You've been screened in for those, and so is everyone else.
Right.
And so that's what got me interested in learning about what I kind of considered to be the secret third path that Dave was experiencing, where he was not necessarily outworking everybody, not necessarily smarter than everybody in the traditional sense of knowing details of financial derivatives. He was able to go out and exercise something that was even more rare at that level of performance and in that type of company, which were the human skills, the people skills that were required to create relationships that eventually brought in business. And that was just a massive game changer.
Right. Well, it's good that you learned it young. I mean, most people wouldn't even recognize that. Did being that 14-year-old mischievous self, you think, make you more perceptive, more receptive to seeing a different angle like this and picking up on that? Because most law firms, most companies, they're not teaching that. They want your nose to the grindstone, right? Instead of learning the subtleties and the leverage like you learned.
Yeah, this, for me, learning it young was a blessing in disguise. I wish I had learned it even younger, but that's like this. That's like any soft skill that you learn. The stuff that we teach here at the Art of Charm in our school, for example, the 50% of our clients are married or in relationships. A lot of people could look at it and go, "Oh, this is for single guys only," or something like that. But no, it's not the case. And the guys that we have that come in that are in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s, the problem they're having is they've been a software engineer for 20 years and they were kicking butt, and then they didn't get promoted, and then they didn't get on that project, and then they got passed over again. And it turns out that you can be the best engineer around, but if you're not also able to lead, if you're not able to form relationships, you gas out at a certain altitude and you hit I hate to steal this term, but you hit a glass ceiling. Yep. Where you go, wait, what's happening? And that happens both at the beginning of your career, if you're like everyone else, or if you're in a technical field and you're a worker bee, you can show talent, and you can build skills over time, of course. But eventually, everyone hits this wall, and then we use terms like, "Oh, well, it's all about who you know," and you throw a little bit of stank on it because you're upset. That's what you say when the other guy got it, right? But what we should be saying is, thank goodness I have this advantage where I realized it's about who you know and who knows you, and I know how to leverage my own skills that I've learned manually to create those relationships. And a lot of folks even will think, I thought I was good at this stuff. I thought I was good with the relationship stuff. And you find out later that, well, actually, you're not that good at it because you capped out again at your natural talents. Maybe your natural talent wasn't outworking everybody, or book smarts, or study habits, or things like that. Maybe your natural talent was relationships, but you're still going to be passed up. This is tortoise in the hare. You're still going to be passed up by the person who studies it, learns how to read body language and nonverbal communication, has a practice where they invite people to events and they're constantly connecting people inside their network. That person is eventually going to pass you, even if you are the cool guy who seems to know everybody and plays in the local sports leagues and belongs to every country club. You're still going to get jumped by somebody who's focusing on this skill set.
So how do you make the shift from attorney to entrepreneur teaching charm?
Sure.
It seems like a big jump.
It's not. Well, yeah, actually, I should say it's a huge jump. I was going to say, no, it isn't. But, yeah, what am I talking about? Of course it is. The reason that this happened was because while I'm working on – this is 2007 – I had already started the show, The Art of Charm, in law school because this was a summer associate thing that I had learned from Dave. And I thought, I'm going to use this to get to the top of the law game. And this is going to be my secret third path. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to study up like everybody else. But I'm also going to be leveraging this stuff so that by the time I get to senior associate level or counsel, you're trying to make partner, I've got all of this social capital in my back pocket. Well, what happened was I was working in real estate, finance, mortgage-backed securities, and things like that in 2007. So as soon as 2008 hit, which was kind of a few months, a year or so after I started on Wall Street, we started getting no work. And one of our clients started to go under. Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, these are two of our largest clients. And so we were sitting there doing nothing. And I really loved doing the Art of Charm. I mean, I loved it. So I didn't even have to go to work at some point because they said, look, why don't you guys find other jobs? We're not laying you off, but you're not getting any experience here, and it's going to hurt you long term. And we're always willing to hire you back. We understand that we're screwing over your career right now by not giving you any work. So they came up with like a ton of pro bono stuff we could do, and they helped us learn all these different skills in the legal realm. And I eventually, not having to show up to work anymore, thought, wait a minute. I've got this other side gig that I love. At this point, I had already hired a lot of the other people that worked at the Art of Charm. My business partner, AJ, was working on this stuff full time. We had clients coming and living with us because of the show, and it was a side gig. And I thought, why am I working to find another law job, which I'm not even that interested in, first of all? Why am I trying to find this when at the end of the day, I'm presented with this golden opportunity because they're still paying us, right? I'm still making Wall Street top market salary. There's no chance I'm getting a bonus, but I'm getting my salary for the next 9 or 12 months at this point. And I'm growing a business that would otherwise need an investor. And I've either got to hire somebody who's going to help run the business, or I can just go run the business. So I just started to run the business thinking, eventually I might have to go back to law. I've got this law degree, and stuff like that. Maybe I'll wait till the market recovers, and that just was never necessary. And of course, you spend a few months or a few years as an entrepreneur, you ain't going back to law. Right. I mean, not a chance. So that's what happened, and that's how I ended up doing this stuff full time for the last 10 years.
So in 2007, what was the Art of Charm? I mean, it wasn't a podcast. I mean, was it just live events you were doing?
No, it's a podcast. We were doing a podcast for 10 years. Yeah, it's one of the longest podcasts. It's one of the longest running podcasts anywhere in the world.
Very cool. Because I started in 2009, and I kicked myself in the butt for not sticking with it back then, because even then that was early. So 2007 was way early.
Yeah, we started in 2006, December 2006. So I usually say 2007 just because, let's not.
No, dude, 2006. Come on. That sounds better.
2006, with a week or two left in the year, we launched The Art of Charm, and we've been doing it fairly consistently, at least every month or every few weeks, and now 4 times a week for the last 10 years.
Yeah. So in the beginning, though, it was a podcast, but then were you also teaching workshops? I mean, how were you monetizing it back then? Yeah,
what happened back then was really interesting. We started the show, and we thought, this is fun. We started the show because we had local people who were saying – we got noticed because we started to work on the skills that we were learning from Dave and from Dale Carnegie and from everything else all the time. Me and my business partner, AJ, who's still with us at AOC – he and I would go out 6-7 nights a week for just years on end, and we started meeting every property owner, every restaurateur, and we would show up on these weird off nights where we'd be the only other people there aside from like the owner and 2 friends, and they would say, "Why don't you guys join us?" Or, "We've seen you all over the place." So we started to get noticed, and eventually people who were going out on weekends, like younger guys or single guys, and single women, were like, "We always see you guys here. Do your parents own the property?" Because we weren't paying for drinks. We knew all the owners. We never had to wait in line. We were regulars. We were in college, law school anyway. And so some of these local guys started hiring us. And then when we did the show, we mentioned, look, a lot of local guys hire us. You can talk to us on the phone for, I think we were charging like $100 an hour or something like that. And we immediately just had this onslaught of clients that were interested in learning. I had immigrants to Denmark that were from other countries that were like, "I'm having trouble networking and making friends. Help me." I had a guy like that. I had a couple of mortgage bankers, speaking of predicting future doom, who came on. One of our first clients was a mortgage banker that said, "Look, I've been using your stuff to close deals, and I've made 7-figure sums off this. I want to retain you guys." And he just started throwing us thousands of dollars. And he goes, "By the way, you got to raise your prices." So he sort of showed us how to turn it into a little bit of a business, gave us a bunch of startup capital in exchange for helping him out with problems inside his business, inside his dating life, and in his sales meetings and presentations and things like that. And bear in mind, this is like 6 months to a year after we started the show.
Right.
And so we started to monetize that, and we started to talk about those client successes on the show, just as a matter of course, to prove to people that it worked, not even in a salesy way. And we started to get emails from people saying, "I want to come learn from you in person. The phone stuff isn't going to work for me because I need somebody watching me." And I said, "Look, we don't offer that. I've got stuff to do. I live in Manhattan." And the guy goes, "I'll pay your rent for a month if I can come and stay with you for a week." And that was our first live-in client. And after that worked, we came up with a curriculum, and we talked about his success on the show. We had guys from all over the world saying, "Look, I'll do the same thing. I want to come stay with you for 5 days. I want to take my vacation and come stay with you guys." And we had dozens and dozens of these guys, and now we have hundreds and hundreds.
So, I mean, back then, it wasn't necessarily structured, right? It was like, okay, come live with us. And were you and AJ like, what the hell are we going to teach this guy?
Yeah, it was funny because we had our own curriculum based on what we saw people doing, mistakes that we had corrected in our own behavior. So we were able to correct easy peasy things like body language, the way you sit, stand, walk, talk, the things you need to say, the topics you need to stay away from, how to generate rapport. We'd been working on that stuff for years already, before the show and on the show. So we created a little basic curriculum based on that. But once we started filling up programs, we hired a lot of consultants. We hired a lot of coaches, some of whom are still here at The Art of Charm in our live programs. And we sort of formalized the curriculum, ran it by psychologists, experts, and half the people that I talk to on the show, whether we're talking about persuasion, influence, negotiation tactics with an FBI negotiator or General McChrystal, we're getting things that we're putting into the curriculum. And so, yeah, we were not winging it. We were teaching what we already knew worked for us. But later on, it became, okay, if we're going to have a class with 10 guys in it, we need to make darn sure that we're able to address everybody's concerns, even if it's not an issue that we ourselves have had. And so that took a lot of work. I mean, that's a process that's 10 years in the making and evolving every week.
Right. Would you say these principles are timeless, or have they evolved in the last decade?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, a lot of what you teach with nonverbal communication is evolutionary psychology. It's biology. A lot of the flavels that people have are 20,000, 100,000 years old, depending on what sort of quirks we're talking about here. So, yes, a lot of this is evolving with the times, but I'm not talking about it's different in 1980 than it was now, unless we're talking about things like SMS and text communication and email, which are very niche. There's not even that much cultural overlap when it comes to this. We're talking about things that are workable and functional around humanity in general. So the same type of body language that you use in the United States, you might tweak it for Japan because of cultural influence, but you're not going to have a totally different response in another country that has humans in it as you would here. And because we're talking about lizard brain responses for a lot of what we're doing here.
Yeah, people always ask me if I have a niche, and I'm like, yeah, I help humans sell to humans. So as long as you are human and your customers are humans, this stuff works.
Exactly, Wes, because think about this, right? A lot of what you – and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of what you teach is going to be about building trust and getting people to know, like, and trust you and want to do business with you. That's going to be the same in China as it is in Chicago. The difference is in China they might insist that you go out drinking for 8 hours before they sign the deal. Well, actually, that's probably true in Chicago as well. Maybe that's a bad example. But we're looking at different cultural nuance that might be like, okay, well, I'm doing business in the Middle East. I need to have some family tie vouch for me in order to get the meeting. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the way you sit, stand, walk, talk, take up space, the way that you deal with people in order to generate rapport, to get them to know, like, and trust you so that you can do business, so that you can date, so that you can get intelligence information from them, interrogation. I mean, these are the things that are covered at AOC, and these are the things that people come in for here at AOC.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's perfect. So you're not getting into like sales and marketing per se. This is one-on-one human communications and relationship forming, like foundational type stuff, right?
Yeah, this is foundational type stuff. Of course, we teach a lot of – well, we base our curriculum based on what each student needs to learn. It is tailored. But, yes, the foundations are all going to be covered here. The thing is, we're not teaching necessarily a sales skill set for somebody who's going to say, look, I sell computer monitors. Can I come and learn that from you? You will come here and you will learn foundational stuff that lays underneath every single thing you've learned in your professional life, and you will see the benefits from that. It's kind of like saying, look, I want to be better at basketball. I'm not going to teach you how to improve your jump shot or your layup. I'm going to get you in the gym so that you have stronger hindquarters and legs and so that you have more flexibility. And that's going to obviously help your sports performance. So think of Art of Charm and the skills that we teach here as the foundational stuff that you cannot avoid, that all champions use, and that you absolutely have to have in order to be good or great at anything. However, it's not going to be the minutia. That stuff you can work out on your own. We don't need to, in fact, for most people, the area of greatest leverage isn't going to be, well, I tweaked my email follow-ups from 3 days to 4 days, and I've got 0.01 higher conversion. That's great when you're at the 99th percentile. But if you're at the 70th or 80th percentile and you want to get into the mid-90s, you need all of this foundational stuff that frankly, low performers already think they have and that high performers cannot get enough of, right? We get Navy SEALs and Special Forces guys in here all the time because they realize that a 5% edge is massive. The people who think they don't need this stuff tend to be the people who are probably about to get their butt kicked out the door, and they don't even realize that it's about to happen because their self-awareness is so low. Those are the people that think they don't need this stuff. It's kind of ironic.
Yeah. So, I mean, the important question is, can you get me on the next Grand Theft Auto?
I would love to do that. Yeah, the Grand Theft Auto thing was kind of funny. That was just out of left field. A friend of mine worked with somebody who was the founder of Rockstar Games, and they needed some pedestrians, and I bugged him about it and followed up with them about it. And when I went in, they said, I don't suppose you can do a fake Russian accent. I said, sure. And they said, I don't suppose you can do a nerdy accent, too. Yes, I can. Okay, here's 5 pedestrians and 2 other parts, one of which turned out to be one of the main characters in the game. So that's how that happened.
That's awesome. So in the way you structure your podcast is really unique, and how you open, how you sprinkle in breaks and offers. And you have all these calls to action, challenge, and all these others. How I have to imagine it's not by accident, right? You've got to been testing these But can you walk us through? A lot of my listeners have podcasts, or they're thinking of launching them. They want to get better at them. Is having multiple calls to action like that better than like 1 or 2 simple things like text in or go get this one report just for this one podcast?
Yeah, sure. So I've been preparing for shows for 10 years, and I still feel like there's a lot that I can work on and that I can do to improve things. And bear in mind, I haven't just been podcasting. I've been doing Sirius XM satellite radio for 3.5+ years, several years ago, to do the show live. I've worked a lot on this. But yeah, we read the book that the guest has. I look for little notes on them that aren't maybe even available online by talking to their friends. I'm that guy who reads the acknowledgments section of the book, right? So There's a lot going on here. There's a lot more work, and I really enjoy it because, going back to coming full circle here, you can be talented or you can work on your talent, but if you're willing to outwork everybody and you got a little bit of talent or skills that you've worked on for a really long time, and you're willing to really, really put in the hours to hone that craft by doing some of the boring stuff, like making sure that you know how the audio gear works, making sure you can tweak this and that, learning how to read faster, all the sub skills that most people will never bother doing because it takes too long to see a return. That's where the sweet spot is. And after about 8 years of working on a lot of these fundamentals, I realized, okay, now I can work on higher level stuff, learning how to read faster, figuring out how to make questions go by and edit fan mail and all that stuff for the show. So it's been a competitive advantage of mine for a long time to outwork everybody. I'm still planning to, of course, do that because I realize that a lot of the things that people think are talents or will label as talents in me or anyone else are simply skills in disguise that it took so much work that now they look like they're natural. And that's the goal. I realize, look, I've been doing a show for 10 years. I think I'm maybe 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5 if I'm Larry King 2.0 here, right, who's now still doing this at 84. I'm just in the beginning. Like, I just got my yellow belt in broadcasting, and I'm ready to continue in business for that matter, and I'm ready to really level up. So it's great to see a show that I consider to be relatively new at only a decade be pushing millions of downloads every month, and I'm excited for the future because not only do I not have to wait for this, I can actively pursue all of these different skills and really, really get great at something I love.
Right. How does someone? I mean, how do you stick with it? Right. Most people aren't willing to stick with it, or maybe they don't have someone around them encouraging them to stick with it. The internet now, especially with social media, I mean, it's full of, just buy this one program and you'll be rich. You'll be thin, you'll be taller, you'll be rich. Right. But it's, because people ask me all the time, I'm going to launch a podcast too. And I'll just ask them questions. Why? How are you going to monetize it? Do you have another product or service that this is going to lead into? What about hosting, blah, 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 schedules, on and on and on. And what makes you unique? And they can't answer the question. They think, well, I saw this guy selling a course for $1,000 that I can make $1 million doing a podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh. How do you stick with it, right?
Yeah, it's trendy. I'm with you on that. I don't think there's no trick to sticking with a podcast like there is anything else. One of the reasons I like podcasting is because it's hard. It's one of those that will pick you up and spit you right back out after noshing on your head, because people who started blogs back in the day and did really well, they could outsource and they could get writers, and now they've got this autopilot. Their business is doing well. People think that there's a podcasting gold rush, but the truth is this is a performance. And so people who start shows because they're like, oh, I'm really an expert in something, that's not necessarily going to work. And if you take it 3 rungs down, which is where most people are, which is I'm going to start a podcast in order to portray myself as an expert in something, you're going to get your butt handed to you, because you can't outsource the prep. You can't outsource the speaking on the show. You can outsource the editing, but it won't matter if your delivery is bad. This is the difference between a singing career and writing lyrics for songs, right? They're both tough enough, but if you're a songwriter, you're not necessarily going to be able to go up there and perform that exact same song and knock it out of the park.
Right.
That's not necessarily going to happen. But people don't see podcasting that way. They're like, well, I can talk and I think I'm funny, or I think I'm smart, I should have a show. Nope, sorry. There's a whole workflow that goes into it. There's a whole performance aspect that goes into it. It's exhausting. There's a lot of work on the post-production on the back end. It's just like the people who thought, I'm going to be on YouTube, and then went, oh, man, lighting, camera, video editing, no thanks, and then quit that. This is just another trendy thing that's going to chew people up and spit them out. The difference is with YouTube, there was never this do a YouTube channel and get rich, whereas podcasting has been marketed by internet marketers as start a show, get loaded because ... advertisers, which are not biting on mid-sized shows.
Right.
Or start a course and do that. Great, but you realize there are 400,000 shows in iTunes, and I'm not exaggerating. That's the approximate number of shows inside iTunes. You're competing with them, and many of those people in there have existing businesses, and they are great at what they do. Are you going to come in and try to blow their house down? Good luck. I wish you all the best luck in the world, and I hope you do crush it, but the odds are low.
Right. So how do you kind of like maybe got lost in the question, but like you have a lot of calls to action in your podcast versus like one, focused call to action. Is that just because kind of like you want to throw multiple hooks in the line in the water to see which one they bite on, versus like, hey, just text in this time, and try to get them in one medium?
So what other calls to action are you referring to, so I can make sure I answer the right question?
Well, you have multiple, the Art of the Charm / challenge, or the Art of the Charm / whatever. You've got multiples that I've heard, as well as a text in. And it seems like you sprinkle those in versus having like just one. So what have you seen as far as the efficacy of having different calls to action versus one?
Sure. So the different calls to action that you're going to find on Art of Charm. One is for texting because most people listen on mobile, and so they've got their phone in their hand or in the car with them, which is great. You've also got the Art of Charm Challenge, which is an autoresponder type thing that people can go to no matter where they are. It's not even an autoresponder. That's maybe the technical term, but we have a Facebook group. There's coaching along with that. A lot of people go, I'm new. I'm not going to do your challenge thing. I don't know you. But they'll text and they'll get content. Or if they're in the car and they've got their phone, they'll text, but they're not going to open up their web browser and navigate. The reason we don't have everybody text is because we have 192 countries listening, which I didn't even know there were that many. I've got 192 countries, according to our statistics, listening to the show. Texting and texting in works in America.
Right.
And so it's not our whole audience. So I want people to be able to go there. Those are the two calls to action in the show. So, yeah, we want people to be able to find us wherever they're comfortable. And we find thousands and thousands of younger people texting in and getting that. And we find plenty of other international people and other people who are less familiar with the texting thing just going to the website. So it makes sense to have both.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so speaking of people on their phone, so kind of a final question I'd like to ask. Imagine our listeners are on a plane, they're jogging somewhere, they can't actually stop and do something and implement what they've taken away from this. So what would you encourage people to do once they get to their desk, once they can take action? And I'm going to link to you and link to all of this that we've discussed. So something other than just, go to the website and get this thing. What advice would you say is kind of timeless, but like go take this action now as soon as you can to get better at business, at relationships, at life?
Sure. I mean, the short answer is work on your nonverbal communication. And I'll leave you with this. It's called the doorway drill. We know our first, and I know we're short on time, so I'll buzz through it. But we know that our first impressions are not made verbally, contrary to popular belief. It's not about what you say. It's about how people perceive you. And we make that first impression when we become a blip on their radar. So not when we open our mouth, but when they see us. If we walk into a restaurant or something like that, we're being judged by everybody else, consciously or subconsciously at that point in time. It's evolutionary psychology. It's a safety thing. And this is how humans all work. And if you don't believe me, go for a walk and you will immediately make judgments about the people you see. The problem is we're not focused on our nonverbals enough to make a great first impression most of the time. And when we think we have to do it, we're going to a networking event or a meeting, we try to do it manually. We stand up, we put our chest up, we get our chin up and our shoulders back and a smile on our face. And that's great. That's great. We do that. But we try to do it manually. So the problem is that when you go to that meeting and you go to that event or you walk into that room, if you're not doing this every time you walk in, you're going to have to figure out how to maintain this while also staying present and while also concentrating on what other people are saying, what you're going to say, strategizing the conversation, getting to the result that you want, or enjoying the interaction. That's very, very difficult. So what we need to do is relegate our nonverbal communication to the level of habit. And the way that we do that is by using the doorway drill. If you stand up straight, you've got your chest up, your shoulders back, chin up, and a smile on your face, and you don't have to exaggerate this. You'll look a little silly if you do. If you do that every single time you walk through a doorway, even in your own home, eventually what will happen is the next time you do go out for coffee or you do go to a networking event or you do go to a meeting, you will have that same open, positive body language. What that does is not only do we know that the mind follows the body and the body follows the mind, and I can prove that with science on another day when we have more time, this is something that's going to cause you to act a little bit differently. More importantly, though, it's going to cause other people to perceive you differently, which causes them to treat you differently, which programs you to, of course, act as if, because we let people program us all the time, whether we think we do or not. This is how we are learning societal behavior. So when they program us to be reacted to as somebody who is confident, outgoing, open, etc., because of our nonverbals, we start to have a shift in that direction. And if we're doing that every time we walk through a doorway, it means we're doing it every time we leave the house. And if we're doing this with everybody around us, well, who are you? Are you the person that you are all the time? Of course you are. We're made up of those behaviors, right? So this is something that will have a core level identity identity shift happening for you once it becomes habit. And this is extremely powerful, because to be perceived as somebody who's friendly, open, and confident, this is massive, especially if we're having this happen to others and to us without even thinking about it anymore. It's one of the biggest advantages you can see, and all it is a simple nonverbal communications habit that's going to improve our own sense of well-being as well as our results in the real world.
Right. You know, I don't think you were really an attorney, man. I think you just say that for marketing, because you seem like a pretty good guy.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was a terrible attorney, if it makes you feel any better.
That's awesome. Well, man, this has been fantastic. Mr. Jordan Harbinger, owner of The Art of Charm. Thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast. It's been great.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
There's some deep stuff in there. I love his story of, you must lead and form relationships or you'll hit a ceiling. And he learned early on that his early boss was a rainmaker, right? That's the difference. That's in any business. That's the difference. And how do you become a rainmaker? He talked about work on your nonverbal communications, the doorway drill. You need to focus on your nonverbal. Talks about how, going back 20,000 years, evolutionary psychology, we haven't changed. Human beings are the same. That's why I work on the make every sale. Every nuance, as soon as you become a blip on their radar, that's step one of the sale. How do you dress? How do you greet that person? What does your business card look like? Each of those are little steps, little sequences to make every sale. What are you doing in that human interaction to set the tone, to set the pace? Because he says we let people program us as if. That's what I was talking about in the beginning of the show. The people you surround yourself, they're programming you, you're programming them, and you just hold each other back. You have to make an intentional effort to improve and to grow. And that's what he had learned. People were paying him and his brother to teach them how to network, right? How to be human beings, basically. And it just grew from there, teaching networking, closing techniques, dating, presentations. And I have a thing, my sales pipeline, the top of it has a dating sequence, and the bottom of it has your sales pipeline, your sales sequence. And it's the same. You got to go through the steps. Yeah, you can skip ahead a little bit. Maybe you can skip one step, maybe another step, but it usually ends in disaster when you do, certainly when you make a habit out of it. You got to have a process and work your process, because your buyers have buying processes, buying sequences, either formalized or subconscious. And sometimes those are harder, right? The subconscious ones, because they don't realize what they're doing. So you have to have a sales process. Because in every interaction, a sale is made, right? Either you convince your prospect that doing business with you is in their best interest, or they're convincing you that doing business with you is not in their best interest. So in every situation, a sale is made. So are you winging it? Are you shooting from the hip? Are you just hoping that you're good enough? Are you just hoping that things are going to evolve and the sale will be made? Well, let me know how that works out for you. Okay? If you want to formalize it, get serious about the profession of sales, check out makeeverysale.com. If you want the notes from this interview, head on over to thesaleswhisperer.com/session235. You can get the notes on Jordan. I link out to the things we discussed, the Art of Charm, his Twitter account, and do yourself a favor and tune into what he's working on as well. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast as well, more than just downloading it. That does help us bubble up. Leave some comments, ask any questions as well. If you scroll to the bottom of every episode on the blog post, you can ask a question, leave a comment. I'll see those and reply as well. Thanks for listening, and as always, remember to sell different.